Hello and thank you for tuning into the 12 News Candidate Special. 12 News wants to help you make the most informed decision you can during 2024. And that's why over the last few months we've been sitting down with local candidates to give you a better idea on their plans if they're elected. We talked to candidates about everything from the economy to border, inflation, and more. And we even talked with experts about some of the major propositions you'll see on your ballot. While we invited each candidate in for an interview, some did not respond to our requests. So we hope this special gives you more insight as you head to the polls and turn in your ballots. Thanks again for tuning in. Continuing our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024, we are inviting every candidate for federal office into the 12 News studios. Today, we're focusing on the race for the U.S. Senate seat that's being vacated by independent Kirsten Sinema. So we're working with Democrat Ruben Gallego's campaign to get a time to bring him in here to 12 News, but today we are joined by Republican candidate Kari Lake. Hello, Kari. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Don't hold your breath on Ruben. I have a feeling you may not get him, but we hope you do because it's important for him to talk about what he's done to our country. Good.
All right, let's talk. We just talked about Kirsten Sinema here a second ago. She came up with a bipartisan bill, or helped craft it, that didn't pass earlier this year for the border, and taking a look at the border. If you get the job she's in right now, and you may be asked to craft a border bill, what's in the Kari Lake border bill that you think will make the border safe and be able to get passed with both houses?
Well, day one, we know we're going to have President Trump in office, and he's probably going to, by executive order, immediately shut down all of this nonsense at the border where millions of people are pouring in. But I, in addition to that, want to pass a piece of legislation. I'd be happy to co-sponsor it, write it myself, a quick 1 or 2 page piece of legislation that fully funds and expedites the construction of the southern border wall. We know it
Where's
works.
that money come from? That's a lot of money,
You know
Kari.
what? If we can send $260 billion to Ukraine, I know from being on the campaign trail that the people of this country want to spend our money securing our border. We'll find it, we'll pull it from somewhere else. But if we can spend $260 billion on Ukraine, like my opponent has voted for and many others have, if we can spend money on sex change operations for our military and some of the other absolute nonsense out there, we can find money.
So you take it from some more progressive ideas. All right, go on. So you want to build the border wall.
And then we want to go back to remain in Mexico, end catch and release. And we want to actually clamp down on the people who've poured across during this Biden invasion. We've had upwards of 20 million people pour across during the Biden invasion. We know they're not being vetted. We know with absolute assurity that we have convicted rapists and murderers and criminals.
The 20 million fairly, though, been over a long period of time, several presidents.
No. I mean, if you look at the data, it's much higher than what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I know, shocking, they didn't put out accurate figures, but many are saying there's up to 20 million people who've come across in this short 3.5, almost 4-year window. And they've come in unvetted, they've come in illegally, and we need to repatriate them back to their homelands.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's an idea that sounds like a massive undertaking. So let's say, again, you're in office.
I'm not afraid of big jobs.
Okay. Day one on that job, what do you do?
Day one on the job, I'm going to help make sure President Trump has legislation.
No, I'm sorry. Day one on removing the illegal immigrants out of the country.
Well, it's going to be over a period of time. Actually, we have to remove people who have committed heinous crimes, and there have been many. We're watching as these Venezuelan and Chilean gang members have literally taken over apartment complexes.
So you use police officers to
They're here
find them?
in Phoenix as well.
Okay.
We had them all over the valley. Phoenix, Mesa, Paradise Valley, breaking into homes, dinnertime bandits. I just found out they're in Peoria now. So this is why we have to fully fund our police, because we're going to be leaning on our local police and sheriffs to help us out when they encounter somebody here illegally. Right now, you encounter a dangerous felon who's here illegally. You call ICE, you call they won't help. They can't assist because of this lack of leadership. So we're going to relying on local law enforcement to help us out. And that's why we need to fully fund it, Troy. My opponent wrote a piece of legislation to defund the police and to actually get rid of qualified immunity.
Wouldn't you need judges as well if you're going to,
That's in my plan. I've got a 10-step border plan.
Well.
We need more. We need thousands of judges, and we want them right on the border. We don't want them here where you say, okay, we're going to give you your summons to appear in court in 12 years. You're going to appear before a judge immediately. We'll need thousands of asylum judges right there on the border. In addition,
it'll make the decision right then.
Yeah. right away. 97% of these asylum cases are fraudulent. It's a bunch of baloney. 97% of them are. This has been a free-for-all. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, with a wink and a nod, with their rubber stamp, Ruben Gallego, have allowed the whole world in, and our backs are breaking. We can't take it.
And I've seen numbers that say it's closer to 90%. But
by
I'm
any
sorry.
means necessary. It's that critical, Troy, because it bleeds into our economy as well. You know, supply and demand on housing. If you're looking for a rental, an apartment, a rental out there, we're competing now with upwards of 20 million people. We haven't built enough housing.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you have an interesting housing plan. You said you want the federal government to help with like mortgage assistance. Tell me about that plan. Not
necessarily down payment. You know, we heard Kamala Harris say $25,000, everybody who wants to buy a house. We know what would happen with that. The price of every house would go up $25,000 because people would realize everybody had an extra $25,000. There's a better way to do it. There's a better way to do it. When a house or an apartment or a condo goes up for sale, get the person who wants to buy that to get the deal, make the offer, and then it'd be better off if we actually made an assistance to help them bring down the mortgage rate.
So you'd buy down the rate with federal dollars.
For an example.
For anybody?
Under President Trump, 2.77 was what the mortgage rate was. Now it's upwards of 7%, even higher for some people, depending on your credit. That means the average monthly mortgage payment has gone from $1,300 to $2,700. You know, what it really matters is what you're paying per month, right?
Right.
Because if you're doubling your mortgage payment, you can't afford a mortgage. My kids have said to me, and I think our kids are about the same age, no matter how hard we work, if we work every waking hour, we still won't be able to save enough to buy a house.
But you would use federal money then to buy down that interest rate?
I think for first-time buyers or people who can qualify for the house, right now this young generation can't get into it. Now, these are not programs I want to be long-term. We need a little bit of help right now to get through this dismal economy and the damage that Kamala Harris and, frankly, Ruben Gallego have done. Same thing with our seniors. There's so many seniors out there, and if you're watching right now, I know you're struggling. I've seen seniors, they're on a limited fixed income. They're watching as they maybe even paid off their house, but they can't afford the monthly payments now because electricity has gone up, food prices have gone up, everything has gone up.
What would you do about raising prices, about inflation?
What we would do about that is right now, these seniors right now on a fixed income are barely keeping up with their monthly expenses, and then they get a property tax bill, and they can't afford it. They're a couple hundred behind on a property tax, and now the government's coming in trying to take their house.
You would lower their property taxes?
I think we need to do some assistance for seniors in the short term until we can get out of this nightmare Kamala economy and get back into the Trump economy to prevent them from going homeless. My fear is that we're going to see hundreds of thousands of people in the next several months either slip into poverty or, worse yet, slip into homelessness. And we're not talking about people who've been using drugs and are chronically street homeless. We're talking about people who just can't get by.
Yeah, the economy is
I talked to a
challenging
woman,
for a
and
lot
I
of
mentioned this in our debate. If you'd like to look at the debate, go to my social media, it's right there, or you can go to Rumble or YouTube and check it out, because I think if you look at that debate, you'll realize there's only one option for U.S. Senate. We got to go with America first. But in my debate, I talked about a woman in the West Valley, an older woman. She's retired, and she said, Kari, for decades I used to volunteer at the food banks. I would, during the holidays, bring food to people at the food bank. Now I find myself going there and putting my hand out and saying, can you help?
The economy's been tough on a lot of people. We're running out of time, Kari. I'm sorry. So can we talk about abortion a little bit? You said that you are supporting all the states to make their own decisions.
That's right.
On what's going on here. And you said you do not support a federal ban on abortion, nationwide ban, correct? And you were actually very timely with your ballot. You got your ballot in very quickly, right? You've already voted, which is good. So we've got Prop 139 out there, which would basically put the right to an abortion in our state's constitution. How'd you vote on that?
I think everyone knows how I voted on that. I think that what we have as a law right now,
yes or a no?
I voted for the current law that we have, which is
a no on 139.
A no on 139. Yeah. I voted for the current law we have. Listen, the current law we have, it was signed into law by both the Democrats and Republicans. It's truly bipartisan, and it's an abortion law that goes up until about 4 months of pregnancy. You know, Ruben Gallego, all he wants to do is drive a wedge on a very personal issue. He spent $40 million on attack ads on abortion. Think how many women and babies that could help. What I want to do as a U.S., and he knows full well, by the way.
You spend a lot on advertising too, Kari.
Nowhere close to him. I don't have George Soros supporting me. I don't have leftist billionaires supporting me. I have not spent that much on advertising because I don't have money coming from ActBlue questionable sources. And so, but $40 million on an issue that's not going to be decided in the U.S. Senate. He knows that full well. I agree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I agree also with the Supreme Court. This is an issue for us right here in Arizona. I want Arizonans to decide. And if Arizonans decide that that proposition is what they want, as your U.S. Senator, I will respect that fully. And as your U.S. Senator, I will not push for a federal abortion ban, but I will push for pro-family legislation. You know, 60% of women who have an abortion say that if they would have had a little bit of financial help or a little bit of emotional help, they would have kept their baby. If that's the case, then we're failing as a society. Why aren't we giving women more help, giving them more options? So I want to work on that. Because we all know, I mean, you're a father, I'm a mother. It's a real beautiful gift, but I hate the thought of anybody walking into an abortion clinic choosing that because they can't afford their baby. And in Ruben Gallego's economy, it's harder and harder to support just feeding yourself, let alone a family.
Can I ask you one last question here? The presidential polls have everything almost in a dead heat across the country. So we don't really know what's going to happen, if you believe the polls at all. Is there any fear in you that if Donald Trump loses this race, we may see some violent protests?
Not from our side. Not from our side. I was just with President Trump. I had a chance to chat with him before the rally. He called me up on stage. We have a really good relationship. If you go to a Trump rally, there's some of the greatest people there. They love this country. Frankly, I love all Americans. You know, Ruben Gallego called Trump voters dumb and the worst people in the world. I would never say that about people who vote for Democrats. I love everyone in this state. For many years, I did what Troy does. I was in your home, and I never asked, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? I truly love the people of this state, and I don't know how we could ever elect a Ruben Gallego, who's already said he hates more than half of our state. President Trump, the MAGA movement, the America First movement is truly about bringing all Americans together. Doesn't matter if you're Republican, doesn't matter if you are independent or Democrat. If you want a safe, secure border, fully funded police, return to quality of life in this beautiful state, and if you want your kids to get a quality education, not an indoctrination, oh yeah, and you want world peace, then
you're offering quite a bit.
No, that's what, I mean, honestly, we are going to give you that. We are about to go into the greatest decades, hopefully longer than that, in American history. I truly have the greatest amount of optimism about where we're going. Next, few weeks are going to be tough. We got to get everybody out to vote. Vote early, get your ballot in. If you've received your ballot, fill it out, get it in right away. We're going to help turn this around. Whether you love me or don't, whether you love President Trump or you don't, we are still going to bring back a strong economy that works for all of us and a great, secure, beautiful Arizona.
Kari, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you,
appreciate
Troy.
it going forward. And joining us now is the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, Congressman Ruben Gallego. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me,
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the border, if we can. It's a big topic everybody's talking about. You've been in Congress a number of years. We probably need some new border laws. Obviously, I know you guys have been working on it.
And investments, yeah.
Right. So if you are the next border U.S. Senator here from Arizona, what's in the Ruben Gallego border bill, that can get passed, not only through Congress, but get signed by the president?
Well, I think the border security compromise bill that we passed before, but was eventually rejected by Republicans, we should bring it back and add some more elements to it. Number one, more judges. And I think the judges can't just be in different parts. We should have judges at the border. So that way we could be determining who actually has a right to claim asylum. And if you don't, quickly deport them. 90% of people that come to the border do not have a claim for asylum. They should not be allowed to stay here for years and years until they get their court hearing. That's what encourages more people to come.
Right.
The other thing is we have to expand the ports of entry. So Arizona in particular our ports of entry are too small. We're not getting a lot of business in terms of trade because of that. And we need more customs and police officers so that way we could check everything coming through, more technology check for fentanyl, because 80% of fentanyl actually comes through the border, and then add more border patrol. That was originally in the part of the original bill, but make sure it actually happens quickly, as well as changing the rules. And here's where we can add more border patrol, but it takes too long in terms of training and the background checks in order for us to actually get enough through the pipeline. So we really have to figure out, for example, what I did early on in my career, joining with Martha McSally to help veterans who already had classified clearance to cross over quickly and become Border Patrol. I just joined in with Republican Dan Crenshaw to help federal law enforcement not have to re-go through the background check again in order to become Border Patrol, since they already did it anyway. These are the kind of things.
Border Patrol officers on the ground more quickly.
Correct, and also making it easier for this is from conversations with Border Patrol, what they've told me, is making it easier for Border Patrol just to hire even local police. Sometimes they don't even have that right to do it, and they have to wait for sometimes months, maybe in a year before they get one new Border Patrol agent, which is not helpful, especially when you have these huge surges.
All right, so what about the millions of people who are here now who have crossed the border illegally? As you just said, 90% of these asylum claims are going to be unsuccessful. So what do we do with them?
Well, I think what we have to do is, number one, have a judicious process to actually get them to their hearings and, of course, deport them if they don't have a proper asylum.
So explain that to me, because we're talking about millions of people. Would you have local police? How would you find the people who are here now?
Well, almost 99% of them actually are already filed. They have to file where they're living, and they have to show up for the asylum cases, right? So you have them go through the asylum case. You have a judge. The reason we don't have as much asylum cases happening around is because there's not enough judges. Hire more judges, have them come and put their asylum hearing together. They will, if they get rejected for the asylum hearing, then they get deported. That's a judicious process that honors our respect for the rule of law, but also gives them an opportunity to prove themselves. But the process that we have right now is broken. Because right now it takes an average of 5 to 7 years for your first asylum hearing. And then the second one, if you appeal, will be another 2 years. So for 9 years, a lot of them will still be here. Now, that's why they're abusing the system, because they know that they're not going to get it.
But wouldn't you need a massive amount of people to go out and find these people, and then, like you said, more judges to? Because at some point, a judge has to look at their cases before they're, deported.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You have to hire them more judges so
Right.
so that you could actually give them their case, and then they get deported. Most of these asylum, and I say most, they want to go through the process. They know that if they actually get an asylum hearing and they win the asylum hearing, they get to stay. If they don't, then they're going to get deported, but they'd rather take their chances and get here legally than not. So this is why doing this in the best manner that honors our due process, have as many judges as possible, and then go through the process that happens already. If you get rejected for asylum right now, you will get deported. That's just how it is. And what we're doing right now is making sure that there is due process with more judges here.
And turning them around right there at the border if they're not going to have their asylum.
Yes, and that's the second key.
That's the big change.
Yeah, that would be the big change, bringing the judges to the border so that way they don't end up here for 5, 7 years or anything else like that.
All right, let's talk about the economy. That's the other big issue that I think a lot of voters are talking about. We've talked about inflation. It has slowed down a little bit, but the cost of living is tough for a lot of people.
Yep.
The Republicans are talking a lot about energy costs and more drilling and things like that. What would be your solution to help this economy?
Well, I think the drilling wouldn't help Arizona. We have no drilling here, but we actually
bring down energy costs.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we need to do in terms of energy costs is actually invest more in renewable energies as well as nuclear. And in Arizona, we have a growing problem, which is caused by two good things. Number one, we have a lot of people that are moving here, and we have a lot of high-tech, high-energy consumption industry that's moving here. We need to make sure that we grow our opportunity to actually have low energy costs. And while I like renewables, that can only be a portion of it. We're going to have to amp up our nuclear capability.
How do you amp up nuclear at this point? That's a massive investment.
Two things. Number one, so we work with what we have with Palo Verde, make sure that we keep it operable, and if you can add another generating station there. Two, there's also
so you'd want to add a fourth reactor to Palo Verde.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's cited for actually 5. The other thing is there's new technology coming out called small modular reactors. These are reactors that require less water and have less of a regulatory time to get built. So they get built in 5 years. I want to place them in areas where we're actually decommissioning these coal mines. So number one, you keep people employed, but number two, you're actually keeping stable power. The other thing about these type of new reactors is that they're stackable. So as you need more energy growth, you could just bring a new one and just stack it right next to it, and it takes your kilowatts more, and you could increase your kilowatts.
Are you looking at places here in Arizona for those small reactors?
So I particularly want to cite places that are closing down. So for example, if you have areas like St. John's, they have a coal power plant that's going to be shutting down in 2031. I want to work with the community, and we've had some conversations already with community leaders, including the mayor of St. John's, to see if they're interested in this, and see if we could, number one, the community needs to have buy-in, but number two, site in those places because it's beneficial to them for jobs, but also it's cheaper for you per kilowatt to building it next to places that already have transmission lines. So old power plants have transmission lines. So all you're doing is basically changing the generation of the energy from coal to nuclear.
Well, nuclear is clean-ish. I was just out of Palo Verde, and a big part of Palo Verde is all their spent fuel.
Yes.
It's going to be dangerous for 30,000 years.
Right.
What are you going to do with that?
Well, look, it's definitely clean-ish, but it is definitively more cleaner than burning fossil fuels, right? And storing it on site is one option. The other thing you don't have to understand, but the small modular reactors actually produce way less nuclear waste than your modern nuclear power plant. As well as there are other new technologies for full nuclear power plants that are moving from fission to fusion that would actually end up being cleaner too.
All right, we just had a story on our newscast a couple of days ago, 250,000 people moving to Arizona in the last year. 700 people a day.
Yeah.
I said, imagine a crowd of 700 people, they're showing up every single day. Housing's a real issue here,
Real
and the
issue.
cost of housing. All right, I know it's tough solutions for those. What would you do?
Well, number one, we have to actually allow people to buy homes. Right now, your average home competitor or home buyer is competing probably a third of the time against a major corporation that's buying our houses as to be part of their portfolio, right? So hedge funds, private equities, they're 1/3 of all the homes, for example, in 2022 were bought by these multi-billion-dollar corporations.
So you would ban them from buying homes?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we used to do that. So this is nothing new. Back prior to the 2008, before the home crash, we didn't allow massive institutions to buy these types of homes because it creates what you have right now, this massive home ownership that actually ends up capping who can buy homes and controlling the cost of everything. If you're a home buyer, a lot of times you're competing against a cash buyer, and that cash buyer is someone from New York City.
But they provide rental houses, so we're having issues even with people trying to find a house to rent.
But so even for rental houses, for example, what you're seeing is these major corporations are now colluding to keep houses rent high. So for example, we just saw this happen with RealPage, something that I noticed right away, and I made sure that the Federal Trade Commission as well as the Attorney General investigated. And what they found was these massive corporations were colluding with each other to keep rent high. They would actually tell one rental company, one landlord, hey, don't rent out your place, hold out for another month, and we could all raise our rent at the same time. That's collusion. You wouldn't allow that in any other industry. You certainly don't get that when it comes to property. That's on one side. We have to increase supply too. And so the federal government has not done a good job about bringing in low-income housing tax credits, which is very important for building in some of our poor areas. When it comes to actually bringing house grants, we are way behind, for example, the Midwest, which has a declining population. We don't receive as much housing support as those states because we're still factored on old bills.
Would you agree with Vice President Harris, who's saying she wants to give $25,000 to first-time home buyers? And where does that money come from?
Well, I think that's a first step. Now, you could, for a lot of that, there's easy ways to find the savings for that, as well as also just giving a low-interest loan on it. So I think the solution should also be going to, right now, where we have a 3.5 usual FHA, first home owner buyer's loan is 3.5%. 3.5% when your average Maricopa house right now is about $500,000. That's about $20,000 after closing costs. Most young families don't have $20,000. Right now, if you look at some private companies like Rocket Mortgage, for example, they're offering 1% down with good credit. I think that's where we should move to. If you have good credit, you should move to 1% down. That is actually more manageable now. And lastly, just increasing other ways to increase supplies, making sure that we have the workers that need to do this. I grew up working construction. I was a construction worker all the way until I got to college. My family are all a bunch of carpenters. When you don't have enough carpenters and construction crews working, you're going to have this problem. As a matter of fact, the biggest problem we have right now is a lot of the construction crews that used to work on housing are now building the chips plants. So we need to make sure we're bringing in new workers into that, whether that's through the community college system, retraining people, bringing time first-time offenders that are coming out of jail, giving them a job and a skill. We just need to get more people into the pipeline to actually build these houses.
And encouraging them to get into the trades, for
Yeah,
sure. All right, we have about a minute and a half left here. So let's talk about federal spending.
Yeah.
Because we just saw a stat the other day, and I remember last time I reported on this, it was 30 cents of every dollar we spent or something was debt.
Yeah.
And now it's even more. How do we rein this in, and where do you cut? Because nobody wants to lose their money, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to look at each individual program and figure out where to cut. Or you could find savings. One of the things that we saw when we negotiated drug prices, that we were able to save Medicare billions of dollars. Now, what does that mean? That means Medicare now has a longer solvency, and also means that we're not borrowing as much money to pay for Medicare. That was only with 10 drugs. Now, what I want to do is make sure we negotiate it with all the drugs that Medicare recipients use, and that could save us even billions and billions of dollars more. We already do this, by the way, with the VA and the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense and the VA, they negotiate all the prescription drugs that veterans, like I receive, or while you're in the military. That's going to save their billions of dollars.
So that's a small slice, but your biggest, of course, spending is Social Security. Do you see putting a cap on Social Security benefits or some sort of a test for income?
Social Security doesn't actually affect our national debt. Social Security itself, though, we have to make sure is solvent. What I want to do is raise the cap on Social Security. When I say raise the cap, people that make more than $400,000 are going to start paying more when it comes to Social Security, because right now it's capped at $160,000 and it keeps raising, and that's not keeping up with growth. So with time. But by doing this, and I actually have a bill, it's called the Social Security Act of 2100, it would extend 100% Social Security solvency to 2060, right? So that's
with those higher incomes.
With those higher incomes, yeah.
Congressman, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming in, and
Thanks
good luck to you coming up next week.
All right, thank you.
12 News is taking a look at the District 1 congressional race, and you can see it there in the pink. It's a huge area, includes parts of North Phoenix, Scottsdale, Fountain Hills, Carefree, and others. So we've reached out to the Republican incumbent in this district, David Schweikert. We're talking with him, but we've not yet been able to schedule an interview with him. We will have him on soon. Today we are talking to his Democratic opponent, Amish Shah. Dr. Shah, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You were a busy man leading up to winning your primary. It was a crowded race. You had 5 opponents, and you said you knocked on some doors.
I knocked on 22,000 doors in all of my time, and it was an honor to be able to go to those folks and speak to them directly and listen to their concerns.
And you're not a newcomer to Arizona politics, so you had 3 terms in the legislature.
Correct.
And you say that you were more successful passing bills than any other Democrat in the last 10 years. Why do you think that was? I
went down there with the idea of building relationships with Democrats, with Republicans, House and Senate. So it was almost my first order of business when I got down there to go sit down with them and find out where we can work together. And I continued to do that all throughout my time.
And you said it wasn't that difficult if you set your mind to it. Explain that to me.
So it's about taking the time to get to know some of those folks and the districts that they represent. What are the issues that are important to them and where we can find some policy agreement. And it turns out, yeah, the Republicans in particular. And it turned out there were many places. So I had 12 bills signed into law over those years, and it was more than any other Democrat in a decade.
So let's say you win this race. We'll project forward. You're going to be a freshman congressman. It's tough to get on committees. You know, it's hard. Day one, month one, what's your priority if you get to Washington?
I've got a few policy areas that I really care about. So healthcare has always been on my mind. I'm an emergency physician. I'm sure you know that I've been practicing for about 20 years.
And are you going to keep practicing, by the way, or is this going to be a full-time job?
That's a really good question. They have a rule in the United States House that you may not have an outside source of income other than the practice of medicine.
Oh,
and so it's the one profession where you might be able to do it. And fortunately, I have an employer right in the heart of the district that is very supportive. So we'll see about that. But I enjoy the practice of medicine. I get to see patients and also get to hear what is going on within the healthcare system. So it drives me, this idea of reforming the healthcare system so that people get covered, costs come down, is important. The quality that we want in healthcare is maintained. I think these things are really important to me. A couple of the other things that are really important, education. I've talked about that for the last 7 years. We have to make sure that teachers are well paid because a lot of them are leaving. There's a very high attrition rate.
So a couple of the issues that Democrats are polling lower than Republicans are in the state, let's hit a couple of those. Immigration and the border. What would you do about that? It's a mess. I feel like we've been talking about it for 30 years. It's broken policy down there. Yeah. How would you fix that?
The border's in crisis, right? And we have to secure it. You cannot have fentanyl coming across. That's one big thing that I really would love to try to work on down there. How
would you do that? Are you for the fence?
So one of the things I did over the last, in my time in the legislature is I was the only Democrat who voted for a bill to make sure that the threshold for felonies for fentanyl came down. And that was really important because what I see as an emergency physician are people who overdose. And we can't have that. Also, my district, my legislative district, had an area in it where we saw a lot of fentanyl abuse. So that's got to get curbed.
So how would that happen? Give me a for instance.
So one of the big things that Congress does is appropriate money, and we know that. So a lot of what we can do is direct more resources at the border. So I've called for more funding for border security. I've called for the ports, the asylum system has a real problem in that there's a lot of abuse of it. So
10% of those asylum claims, from what I understand, get approved. The other 90%, they just kind of are out there.
And so a few months ago, you may have noticed the Biden administration did do something about this and did kind of shut things down. I would like to continue that as well as use that bipartisan framework that actually Senator Sinema had put together as a starting point and hopefully work with the other party and get something done on this.
Dr. Amish Shah, good talking with you. Good luck going forward.
For several weeks, 12 News has been breaking down each of the races. Today, we're taking a look at the District 1 congressional race. It includes parts of North Phoenix, Scottsdale, Fountain Hills, and Carefree. A couple of weeks ago, Democratic candidate Amish Shah joined us in studio, and this afternoon, we have Republican incumbent David Schweikert here. Thank you so much for being in studio with us. You've been serving in D.C. well over a decade now, since that first congressional district win back in 2010. We won't go way back then. We certainly do want to look forward. But, you know, in that time, we've consistently heard voters talking about the economy, more so lately, jobs, cost of living. So if reelected, how do you make housing more affordable? How do we bring down grocery prices?
It's actually a brilliant question. And look, I'm blessed to be number 4 in Ways and Means. And it takes a decade to get that ranking. And I also chair the Republican side of what they call the Joint Economic Committee. Now that's all geeky, but it means you actually have some influence on trying to do crazy things like what would it take to bring more housing to market? So we're doing a whole study with our economists for legislation in the beginning of the year saying if there's government pieces of land, how do we turn them into the next subdivision, the next community, the next place to have homes?
Right, because there's a lot of people talking about all the federal land that's available, but the problem is there's no grocery stores there. We already live in food deserts, so how do you make those places more livable once you obtain that land?
But you run into the chicken and egg problem of if we have a shortage of housing stock. And understand it's much bigger than just traditional federal land. It's BLM land, Forest Service land. There's even Bureau of Reclamation land, state trust land. And you've heard the Vice President, others talk about the stress. But the ultimate solution is you need more homes, and we need a place to build them.
Absolutely. We do want to talk about this because we're in week 1, almost done with week 1 in October. We're flirting with 110 every single day, breaking records. So what needs to be done to keep summers from getting longer and hotter and more miserable, because no one's going to want to live here if this continues?
It's actually a brilliant question. Being the idiot that's out there knocking on doors and sometimes having my little kids with me, it's brutal. Particularly for those of us in the Phoenix area, we also have this additional thing they call the heat dome effect. Yes. I think it's not partisan, but we need to actually engage in some crazy technology ideas. The reflective surfaces on the roofs, air conditioners that actually dump their heat into the water heater instead of pumping it out into your neighborhood. There's actually dozens of these things that are being studied by ASU and other places.
Yeah, a lot of universities taking on the heat island effect and the non-cooling overnight.
And we should actually, and in many ways, they would actually lower our bills.
Okay, and that's what everybody wants.
And there's some new technology we think coming out on air conditioners that also could crash the price of electricity they use.
Okay, so see, we want to see some more of that, lower prices there. Also, we want to talk about, I'm glad you brought up partisan, because bipartisan work needs to be done, obviously. People are completely divided, more so even now after the recent assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump. Will civility wedge its way back into politics at some point?
It's a good question. Look, I'm blessed. If you're in Congressional District 1, you're in one of the highest educated districts in America. And I find actually the tone in this one is you have a population that wants to be treated like adults. They want to be spoken to with actual details, not platitudes. But I do see some of the dopamine hits that come through media, come through the politicians, that are feeding people, and sometimes for emotion, and sometimes to raise money, and not actually solutions.
And that is one thing we want. We want solution-based policies. I think most people would agree with that. Lastly, while I've got you here, we have a growing number of independent voters. As a Republican and the incumbent, how are you appealing to those who are undecided as we sit 32 days away from Election Day?
Look, most people don't realize independents are now the #1 registration in Arizona. And it's how I've been blessed to get reelected. We're blessed. We do well with independents.
Okay. Well, best of luck in November. And thank you for coming into the studio. I know your daughter's here, and I hope that housing drops by the time she's ready to start up that mortgage. You know what I mean?
On Decision 2024, we've invited numerous candidates live into our studios to learn more about their policies and about them. And today we're taking a closer look at one of the highest profile propositions on our ballot, and that's Prop 139, which at a basic level would put abortion rights into our state constitution and allow abortions up to fetal viability or about 24 weeks of pregnancy. So we have a spokesperson for the No on 139 effort coming up in just a few minutes. But we begin with Laura Dent now with Arizona for Abortion Access. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us, first of all, why you think we need this law in our books.
Well, we need this law in our books because the United States Supreme Court 2 years ago undercut Roe versus Wade, essentially stripping away a right that Americans have enjoyed for 50 years in this country, and that is the right to and the freedom to make decisions about our own health care. And so Arizonans got to organizing around this initiative as soon as that happened, and Prop 139 is really about making sure that we as everyday people have the freedom to make those choices for ourselves without politicians and government interference.
Since that time when Roe v. Wade was overturned, we worked in the legislature, and the governor did it as well, that we have abortion allowed here in Arizona up to 15 weeks of pregnancy. Why is that inadequate in your view?
Well, we've actually whiplashed all over the place. We first had Roe v. Wade fall at the federal level. Then we had the Arizona State Supreme Court institute a Civil War era abortion ban. Then the legislature repealed that ban and replaced it with our current ban, which has no exceptions for survivors of rape or incest. So Arizonans are overwhelmed. We experience whiplash around this issue, and we really just need to codify this protection once and for all in our Constitution so we can protect that freedom that every Arizonan deserves.
A lot of opponents of this plan, though, look at 24 weeks or close to 6 months of pregnancy and then even beyond and say, where are the safeguards when we talk about viability? Because as written in the plan, if the life of the mother is involved or some other issues with the doctor, it can go beyond 24 weeks, correct?
Proposition 139 is really about establishing the right to safe and legal abortion. I, myself, am 6 months pregnant, and every time I walk into the clinic...
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Just drop that on me right now. Yeah.
Every time I go to the clinic to see my midwife, I'm optimistic, I'm excited, but there's a little bit of fear because pregnancy brings health risks and complications. And what folks don't talk about is when there are some of these late-term abortion experiences, it's in really tragic circumstances where folks want to have their child, want to bring their child into the world, and unfortunately have issues and complications that don't make that a possibility. So the current ban restricts access to care for those women. I've met some incredible leaders on this campaign that have fled the state in order to get the abortion care and the health care that they need, and have had to essentially get incredibly sick before they can get the health care that they need in Arizona. So our current ban is failing us, and that's why we need voters to support 139.
So from what I understand, it's fairly close with the polling here. What would you say to people who are on the fence? What we have another week and a half or so? What would you say to them right now?
I would say right now that our personal feelings about abortion are not what's at play here. This is about the freedom for every individual to make their own decisions. And it doesn't mean that's how I feel. It doesn't mean that's how you feel. It's about respecting the fact that no politician is ever going to understand our lives better than we do. And we need to extend that freedom to every voter across the state and support 139.
Laura, thank you for coming in. So again, working on our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024, we're taking a closer look at one of the highest profile propositions on our ballot, Prop 139, which would put abortion rights into our state constitution. We talked to a pro-member just a short time ago, and now we have Cindy Dahlgren here. Hello, Cindy. You do not want Prop 139 to pass. Why not?
Well, let's start with the fact that there is no ban. Contrary to what proponents are saying, there's no ban. Abortion is legal here in Arizona up to 15 weeks, that's almost 4 months, and then beyond that for any medical emergency. And that's a very broad exemption. Even Attorney General Chris Mays says that that covers those late-term crisis pregnancy complications that proponents were just talking about. They're already covered under Arizona law. And also the miscarriage treatment, already covered under Arizona law. It's 362151.
So you support the 15-week ban or the 15-week law that's on our books right now?
Well, we actually, our organization is made up of a bunch of people from various views. We have pro-life, pro-choice, Democrats, Republicans. So we don't take a position, but we all agree that this amendment goes too far because it gets rid of a lot of the safety precautions that we have in place to protect girls and women who do get abortions.
Like what?
Like the critical ultrasound. If a woman does not get an ultrasound before taking the abortion pill and she has an ectopic pregnancy, it could kill her. If she's further along than she should be in taking the pill, it could lead to very serious complications.
And you're saying that's a fundamental difference between what we have now, the law on our books now, and how this proposition is written?
Yes, exactly. The ultrasound, even the attorneys for proponents said that the required ultrasound now would not stand under Prop 139. And if a woman doesn't have an ultrasound after taking the abortion pill, she still has fetal remains in her uterus, it could kill her. We saw that in Georgia. So these are critical safety precautions. These are not just burdens like they call them. And And it's important that voters know that there is not a ban and that those miscarriage treatment is covered, and those late-term abortions, or those late-term abortions that are possibly necessary in case of those late-term, very sad situations where there are complications later in pregnancy. And right now, women are getting that coverage, and doctors are not afraid. It's already protected under Arizona law. But they're telling voters the opposite of that, and they're trying to manipulate voters and tell them that there's a ban when there's not. And I think that's because they do not want to talk about the specifics of this amendment.
Let me stop you really quickly. I keep hearing that they're saying there's a ban, and I've seen it on billboards and things, but specifically, I don't remember anybody ever saying abortion is banned in Arizona. I think most people know that abortion is not banned in Arizona.
Well, I don't know about that, because when we've talked to people, they're a little confused on what it is, because the TV commercials and the woman that was just here, she called it a ban. They call it a ban to misrepresent it and manipulate voters into thinking they need Prop 139 in order to get access to abortion, and that's not true. Whether you support abortion or not, it is legal in Arizona up to 15 weeks, and then beyond that for that broad exemption of medical emergencies.
And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked last woman who's in here. If you have somebody who's undecided right now and they've got a week and a half to try to make it happen, or voting right now, what would you say to them quickly, 30 seconds?
I would say we are not choosing between abortion and no abortion. We're choosing between abortion up to 15 weeks, guaranteed to see a qualified medical doctor, safety precautions in place, either that or abortion throughout the pregnancy for virtually any reason, no doctor, no safety precautions, and it puts girls' and women's health at risk.
Cindy, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, new tonight, just 5 days before early voting starts in Arizona, the state Supreme Court gave the final go-ahead for a ballot measure that would overhaul our elections. 12 News journalist Bram Resnick explains why this ballot measure could give more voters a voice in who represents them.
The Arizona Supreme Court gave Proposition 140 the go-ahead after a protracted battle over the signatures that put the Make Elections Fair AZ Act on the November ballot. Prop 140 would give the fast-growing group of independent voters a greater voice, while lessening the power of political parties. Here's what Prop 140 would do. Partisan primaries would be abolished. All candidates, whether affiliated with a party or not, would be placed on one ballot. All voters could cast a ballot. The legislature would have to decide how many primary candidates could advance to the general election. And the state would be barred from paying for primary elections, as it does now, unless all voters were allowed to participate. After its courtroom defeat, the conservative Arizona Free Enterprise Club said this: Proposition 140 is seeking to enact a California-style election scheme built around ranked choice voting and jungle primaries. An official with Make Elections Fair Arizona responded, Arizona will have the opportunity to put voters, not political parties, in charge of our elections. If Prop 140 is approved by voters in November, Arizona could have open primaries in time for the 2026 election.
Staying with our commitment now to keep you informed during Decision 2024. When voters cast their ballots this year, you'll be asked to vote on Prop 312. This is a statewide ballot measure dealing with homelessness and taxes. If it passes, property owners will be allowed to apply for a refund on their property taxes if their local government, city or county, doesn't enforce laws on camping, panhandling, and loitering. The issue was put on the ballot by the Arizona legislature primarily because of fallout from this huge homeless encampment known as the Zone in downtown Phoenix. So business owners had to sue the city of Phoenix to enforce its own camping and vagrancy laws. So there are groups who oppose this measure. We are in discussion to bring them into our studio to share their view. But today we are talking with Arizona Chamber of Commerce President Danny Seiden, who is supporting Prop 312 along with your organization. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Troy. Yeah, happy to talk.
All right, why does the Chamber support 312?
When municipalities fail to enforce laws around vandalism, nuisance, things that lower the property values, the people who shoulder the costs are the private property owners. So for far too long, not everyone can afford to sue a city to do its job. So we want to make it easier for all property owners to know that when they call the police, when they request help, when they request things that are not just, it's dangerous. I mean, public safety and safe neighborhoods are essential to a good, thriving business community. You know, and if we don't act now, if we don't do something different, we're going to be San Francisco and Los Angeles pretty soon.
So give me a for instance. What's happening? We saw the zone, but what else is happening in Phoenix and beyond?
There's several instances of some of the nicer, we'll call them convenience stores, gas stations, retail locations, where they'll call the police and say, hey, we have a homeless person who's come on, they're doing drugs, what do we do? They don't show up. They really don't show up. They're having, not getting their emergencies responded to, and then again, they have to shoulder the costs for any kind of cleanup or liability that happens. They're having to hire off-duty security guards to watch their property at all times, when, by the way, that's what property tax dollars are for. So again, this is renewing the commitment from the municipalities to the property owners that they know when they pick up the phone and call for help, someone will answer.
So opponents are saying, you know, you talk about, say, a QT store, that's got to be a big property tax bill. So the city's just going to be stroking a check, and won't that money come from other services that could be used to help the homeless?
I would argue this will this will show the cities what the priorities are. People want safety. They want clean, safe neighborhoods. And by the way, it does a homeless person no good to be ignored by the city either. So when a property owner calls and asks for help, if the city shows up, we can get them into services. We can get them into transitional housing with great partners like St. Vincent de Paul. So again, our members care, whether it's a QT, a Target, anyone, they all care about this homeless population. But when the city doesn't respond, there's nothing they can do. And ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It only makes it worse.
And the opponents also say, why aren't we seeing a prop on the ballot that says, here's a certain amount of money for homeless people to come through?
Yes, and again, I'll tell you, the private sector and charitable giving has never been higher in this regard. They've done everything they can. But again, ignoring them when they're on your property, committing crimes that drives the value down. I mean, we have a study that shows this costs private property owners $2 billion. $2 billion to fix their own vandalism, to fix what is done from the nuisance, what is done just in terms of cleanup of waste. I mean, all of that falling on them when they pay property tax dollars for that, it's not right.
What do you think happens if this does not pass?
If this does not pass, I think you'll see more lawsuits, unfortunately. I think you'll see more and more private businesses using nuisance litigation to go after cities, and that's not good either. We want a system that prioritizes the health and safety of our neighborhoods.
And let's shift gears. We've got about 45 seconds left. You have kind of an overall look of the business climate here in Arizona. What's 2024 and 2025 look like, the rest of this year and next?
Sure. Right now, we have a lot of good news on the way still. We have a lot of investment coming in, still built around that ecosystem of semiconductors. TSMC at $65 billion. More and more announcements are on their way. Out in the Scottsdale area, we have ASM and a lot of investments coming in from the Netherlands. So there'll be some good news on the way. There is a little bit of a tightening in certain areas right now. You're seeing some rifts, some layoffs from the. I would argue it's inflation, and it's kind of a readjustment of, you know, post-COVID, where there was a buildup of a need for supply. When we have a big inventory, once that's cleared out, there'll be some readjusting. But the good news is unemployment rate is at a record low. Labor and participation rates at a record high. So all that's really good news right now. So
thank you so much for
coming.
coming.
Troy, appreciate it. Yeah.
The voters of Maricopa County in the last 30 years have elected only 2 sheriffs. Well, now coming up in November, you will have a chance to elect a 3rd. Coming up tomorrow, we will have the Democratic candidate for sheriff here in studio, but today we are bringing in the Republican candidate, Jerry Sheridan. So, Jerry, good to have you. Good to be here today.
Thanks, Troy.
So let me start with an easy question. Why do you want this job, and why should voters put you in it?
No, that's actually not an easy question.
Okay.
But it's about passion. I spent 40 years at the sheriff's office. The people that work there asked me to run once again. And the passion to take care of business. And the second passion is to keep people safe. And the sheriff's office has a history of doing that very well.
You talked about your years there at the sheriff's office. You served under Joe Arpaio. You were his number 2. The end of the Arpaio regime there was not very popular with voters and had some problems as well. Are we looking at a Joe Arpaio 2.0 if you get in this office?
Absolutely not. I am not Joe Arpaio. They only made one Joe Arpaio. I worked for 4 sheriffs in those 40 years, and I learned from them and all the other people that I worked for over the years what to do and what not to do.
So what did you learn what not to do from Joe Arpaio? Would you learn what to do, if I can ask you specifically?
Yeah, what to do is make sure you take care of your people. That's the number one thing. That's lacking in law enforcement. And what not to do is become addicted to media attention. And I think that caused him the election in the long run.
The sheriff's office is under a federal monitor right now. There are some 150 employees who do nothing but deal with that.
Right.
How are you going to deal with the federal monitor basically looking over your shoulder if you get this office?
Well, don't forget, I dealt with that federal monitor for the last 3 years I was there, the chief deputy. I understand how they work and what's going on. And the paragraphs are very difficult to be able to comply to, and we're going to continue to work that. I set the foundation for the Penzone administration to be successful, and I will continue with that as long as it takes. But I think the key is communicating with the court about what we're doing, what works and what doesn't work. Let's face it, the judge wanted us to have unbiased policing. That was it. We all want unbiased policing, and we will continue to do that. But I think some of those court orders in his, 150
Right, 'cause there's
paragraphs,
a whole bunch of them,
don't have that happen. And I will communicate that to the judge so we can work out better and use those human resources, those deputies that are assigned to other things, to put them out there take care of people, because I think public safety is suffering in the long run.
Last question, because we're running out of time. What's different about a sheriff versus a police chief is you also run the jails. You would run the jails.
Well,
the jails have some issues.
There's a big difference. The sheriff's elected by the people.
Okay.
The sheriff only reports to the people. 75% of the sheriff's office is that jail function. And one of the things that I'm very happy now sitting here in front of you is that the sheriff put me in charge of those jails. And I ran those jails for 12 years. We oversaw the design and construction, 4th Avenue, LBJ. And for people that don't realize, when we built a new kitchen, we built a freezer the size of a football field. And at that time, we were serving 30,000 meals a day. It's a huge undertaking that no one from a city agency has any idea about.
And you're talking about your opponent, Tyler Kamp, who comes from a city agency.
Him, the previous sheriff, the sheriff in the 80s, that was from Phoenix PD, they have no idea. And that's 75% of what the sheriff does.
All right, thank you for coming in. Decision 2024, Maricopa County voters have only elected 2 sheriffs in the past 30 years, and we'll get a chance to elect a third coming up in November. So 12 News want to take a closer look at the 2 men who are running for office. Yesterday at this time, we had Republican candidate for sheriff Jerry Sheridan in the studio. Today we're bringing in his opponent, Democrat Tyler Kamp, former Phoenix PD lieutenant. Good to see you. Thank you for being in. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Jerry yesterday. Why do you want this job, and why do you think voters should put you in it?
Yeah, so I've always been a person who wants to serve a purpose greater than myself. So when I considered running for sheriff, I asked myself 2 questions. One is there a need? And 2, can I make a difference? So I think the need is obvious. We have seen what's happened in the past during the Jerry and Joe show, discrimination of people of color, violating people's rights, which has cost the county close to $300 million, and it continues to grow. So I think we know there's a need for a good quality sheriff. But can I make a difference? I worked for the Phoenix Police Department for over 2 decades. Over half that time I spent investigating organized crime, criminal street gangs, homicide, cold case homicides. I have 10 years of leadership, public safety leadership experience.
Let me stop you right there if I can. So as a lieutenant, of course, you are leading a decent number of people. But now we're talking about you taking over the sheriff's office that has 3,400 employees. You're managing jails. Do you have the experience to pull that off?
Yes, absolutely. And if you remember, Sheriff Penzone was a sergeant with the Phoenix Police Department. And I think we could all agree he's done a pretty good job. And so I retired as a lieutenant or a shift commander. When I was working at the precinct, I controlled all the operations for that precinct when I was at work. But even let's go beyond that. So I retired in 2021. And I worked overseas for the largest anti-slavery organization in the world fighting human trafficking. I was director of investigations. And then when I returned home this past year, I was director of executive protection for a couple local nonprofits here in Arizona.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of big issues that you have. Let's talk about that monitor, because right now, currently, the sheriff's office has 150 people working on basically investigating itself, and only 140 people working on investigating general crimes. What are you going to do to try to help with these federal issues they're dealing with, the oversight?
Yeah, so that federal lawsuit that created the court orders, it was the best and worst thing that could happen to this county. The best thing because it exposed some of the abuses of power and unconstitutional practices that were being done at the sheriff's office under Sheriff Joe and Jerry Sheridan during their tenure. The worst because it has suffocated morale, it has drained resources that could be utilized elsewhere, so it's hurt recruiting and it's hurt retention.
Yeah, and the jails, big part of what you're going to be doing if you get this job, they are woefully understaffed. How are you going to fix that?
Yeah, staffing is a big one. We have to fully comply with that court order and graduate from it. That will free up some resources. But when I talk to folks, when I talk to the rank and file, there's 3 things that are important to them. It's pay, it's benefits, and it's the nature of the work. And so I have a plan for pay. I'm going to work with the Board of Supervisors to create a pay scale system that's merit-based, that's similar to other law enforcement agencies in the Valley. I'm going to create a walk-in wellness clinic that will meet not just their physical needs, but their mental needs. It's very important that we are sensitive to the mental aspects of the job. It's hard, it's difficult, and we also want to offer that to their families. Employees need to be happy at home. If you're happy at home, you're more likely to provide better customer service while you're at work.
All right, we've only got a few seconds here, but the nature of law enforcement seems like it's changed a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. How do you see the future of this department? Give me like in a couple of sentences. How would you change the future of the department?
I think we have to ensure justice for all. We have to keep politics out of public safety. When I talk to people across the county, they don't want politics involved because it can corrupt public safety. And we have to make sure that everybody knows we have justice for all equally, no matter who you are or where you come from.
Tyler Kamp, Democratic candidate for sheriff. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Keeping with our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024, 12 News is taking a look at the District 5 congressional race. Now, District 5 covers Gilbert, Queen Creek, Southern and Eastern Chandler, and Eastern Mesa. We've reached out to the Republican incumbent in this district, Andy Biggs, and we're working to schedule an interview with him, so we hope to have that for you very soon. But joining us right now is the Democratic candidate running in District 5, Katrina Schaffner. Katrina, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I find it interesting. You're originally from Chicago, moved here to Arizona 6 years ago. So you've made Arizona home primarily because it's more affordable to live. And that's actually one of your passion points when running. Tell us more about how you would create more affordable housing.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I have moved here 6 years ago. So we got here just in time, right before COVID hit. We bought our home. So interest rates were still low and the home was still accessible and affordable to us. But post-COVID, we've seen that huge shift, right? We've seen the housing market increase. We've seen interest rates get higher. I don't understand how young families are supposed to buy their starter homes and actually put some roots in, and actually have a home for their families.
So what would you do?
So I would absolutely try to build some more competition. Right now, we have a system where corporations have sort of been allowed to run amok. We need to hold billionaires and their companies and corporations accountable so that we can actually invest in everyday families. That means we need more competition. We need to support smaller businesses, builders. Right now we have just a handful of builders who are driving the housing market, and including they're deciding how quickly to buy the homes or to build the homes. So they are driving that cost. We need that competition so we can bring those prices down, and that's one of the bigger points.
What about when it comes to education? I mean, U.S. News and World Reports ranked Arizona as 45th in the nation. What would you do about education?
Yes, well, I do have a little one, so education is really important to me, and I think it's important that all children have access to what they need in their schools, and that includes public schools. Our public schools right now are vastly underfunded, so resources are slim, and we're expecting way too much of our teachers. We need to be able to fund our public schools so that all the children have access to anything that they need, whether that's school materials or mental health care. But right now, those needs are not being met.
How about immigration?
Immigration is also a big one here in Arizona. We are a border state. We need to focus on that border bill that's been tied up in the House and the Senate because Republicans have put a stop to it. We need to get that passed. That's going to fund Border Patrol. It's going to address the fentanyl crisis, and it's going to provide the resources that we're lacking right now. So we need to get that border bill passed immediately.
I have to ask, you've never ran for office. This is your first time running. Why should people vote for you?
Because I am not a career politician. I'm not a corporate politician. We need more working class representation in Congress. Most congressional candidates are millionaires. The system is not built for people like me to run for office. We need to change that. And our campaign is powered by people who want to see a change in our political system. So it's really important that we have that diverse representation, because right now we have too many blind spots in Congress and people are being left behind.
All right, Katrina, we thank you so much for your time.
Staying with our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024, we've invited every candidate for federal office into our 12 News studios. Today we're taking a look at Congressional District 5, which covers Gilbert, Queen Creek, parts of Chandler, and East Mesa. It's seen as one of the most conservative districts in our state. We interviewed Democratic candidate Katrina Schaffner last month, and today we're talking to the Republican incumbent, Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. You've been in Congress since 2016. Let's start with the border. I know you've had a lot of discussion about the border since that time. If there could be an Andy Biggs border bill that would pass, what would be the main points of that bill?
It would probably look a lot like H.R. 2, which at one time or another, I introduced every one of those pieces of legislation. They got kind of put together, and that would include things like taking care of the Flores issue decision, taking care of Title 42, to making sure that MPP, which is the Remain in Mexico policy, could be advanced. We'd probably actually add some additional things in there. You have to incentivize the nations that won't allow us to return people to their nations. We have to incentivize that, so you have to figure out how you do that carefully. But the wall would continue to go up. You would also have all of the infrastructure, Troy, that's stopped. I mean, so when you find out that maybe a third of the operable or what should be functional cameras and technology on the border, they're not even functioning, Troy. Yeah. So you have to make sure those are functioning too. Make sure you got agents in place, making sure you're taking care of the agents.
So what about, and it's been argued the exact number, we can just call it millions. What about the millions of people who are here now who came across the border illegally? What would you do with them?
Well, I'd start with the people that have already had a due process, and they would have to be removed. So what I'm talking about is literally 1.5 million plus individuals went to had their case go to court. They were ordered to be removed from the United States. They should be removed from the United States. They've had due process.
So how would you do that, Congressman? You know, that sounds like a massive undertaking. Would you put that on local police? Would there be a new federal agency? And then you'd have to have judges too, right? I mean, you'd have to have people saying, yeah, this is the person, and now you have to go.
Well, you already have an agency that's supposed to do it. They've not been allowed to do that, and that's the ICE, Immigration Custom Enforcement. They have not been able to basically locate these people and remove them. And so you already have that agency in place, and so you'd use that agency to start. And that's where you would begin. And then you would go with the people who are criminal aliens, and there's over, even this administration has admitted over 500,000 of those, 14,000 roughly of those are convicted murderers. You've got rapists there. Those people should not be allowed in this country. The problem that you have, Troy, and you kind of put your finger on it, is that this administration has actually released those people into the country. And so normally we would have detained them, and after they had their hearing, denial, they would order to be removed. We would actually already have them in custody, or we would have them someplace where we knew where they were. That's not the case now. We're going to have to find them again and remove them. It is going to be a massive undertaking.
Well,
There's no doubt about it.
It sounds very, very big. All right, so we've got less than a minute left. Economy, quickly. What would you do to bring down some of this inflation we're dealing with and get our economy going again? 1 minute.
You have to loosen the restrictions that were put in place by the Biden administration on energy. Once energy gets flowing again, and you could have that up and going within a year, prices will come down by about 40%, because the price pressure that you feel is not all traditional inflation. It's a lot of it is energy. So you take care of that 40%, and then Congress has got to get its act together on spending and actually quit spending so much. We have a $2.5 trillion a year structural deficit, Troy. That's not a cyclical deficit. That's structural. You have to bring that down, and you do that by regulatory relief. You do it by bureaucratic contraction, and you also do it by making sure that your economy is flowing so it provides the tax revenue that you need.
All right, Andy Biggs, Congressman, thank you for joining us now, and good luck to you on Tuesday. We'll talk to you again soon. 12 News is working to give you the information you need to vote in this election. So we've invited every congressional and Senate candidate on 12 News at 4. And today we're looking at Congressional District 3. It's made up of Central and West Phoenix, including Laveen and Maryville. It's a seat currently held by Senate candidate Ruben Gallego, who is leaving. So both candidates in studio today with us. Republican Jeff Zinc, Democrat Yasmin Ansari. Thank you both for being here and appearing together. And Jeff, I think you said something interesting when I thanked both of you. What did you say that you were appearing together?
I said we're not enemies. We just have different views on issues. That's it.
What would you say is your biggest difference from Jeff, issue-wise?
I think we have a number of differences. First and foremost, the issue of abortion. I'm very much pro-choice and believe that we need to make sure that every individual in this country, every woman in this country has the freedom and privacy to make their own decision about their medical future and what they do with their own body. That is a fundamental difference between the two of us. My record of experience on the Phoenix City Council dealing with issues like housing affordability and issues like raising wages, another significant difference between the two of us. But I'm sure once we get into it, there's a number of just fundamental differences between how we approach policy and where we stand on issues like the economy and immigration and others.
Well, we'll touch on all those. Let's start with abortion, though. Do you like the current law on the Arizona books right now, 16 weeks?
The 16 weeks is a good start as far as trying to make it where it's at the state level. That's what's more important. It doesn't need to be at the federal level. The Roe versus Wade, even Ruth Bader Ginsburg stated that it was actually debated incorrectly. So we need to make sure that it goes to the states so that they individually decide with the people whether they want to have abortion or not. Now, as a pastor myself, Exodus 20:13 says that thou shalt not murder. So as a pastor, I want to protect the child from conception.
You're pro-life.
I am very pro-life. From conception to late term, even in some cases, California, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, have where you can kill a child up to 28 days after they've been born.
Okay, let's talk about the economy if we can, because you brought that up. How do you think that you would help fix the economy if you made it to Congress?
Absolutely. So one of the things we need to do is we need to start opening up our oil fields again. We need to start the Keystone Pipeline. We need to make sure that we start exporting oil and gas once again. This is something that will start to stimulate our economy and start providing jobs here in our country instead of doing what we've been doing, which is sending all of our manufacturing and everything out of our country. If we stay inside the country and we can put our people to work, this is a massive country that can really work for itself and make sure that we provide for our own.
Yasmin, Democrats are polling below some Republicans, if you believe the polls, on the economy. How would you work to better it?
A number of things. First and foremost, I want to address something Mr. Zink said. I have a background in clean energy policy. I was a senior climate advisor at the UN, and here in Phoenix helped pass the city's first climate plan. I can tell you I have endorsements from labor unions across the board that are representing working people here in our district, from the carpenters to the iron workers, and they believe in clean energy jobs and investing and transitioning our economy from the fossil fuel industry.
So you don't want to drill or frack?
I do not, no. The science is very, very clear on this issue. 99% of scientists around the world agree. I mean, look at our extreme heat in the summertime. We need to invest in clean energy. The Biden administration has been enormously successful in that, and that's why I'm supporting
Your
President Harris
presidential
as
candidate
well.
just said she was for fracking last night. I saw her on CNN. So you disagree with her on that?
The vice president is very, very strong on climate policy. I mean, she's extremely strong on this. She believes that we need to decarbonize by the year 2050, which is what the Paris Climate Agreement accounts for. When it comes to the economy, I also believe that housing affordability is a significant issue we have to address. Here in Phoenix, we have a housing shortage. We do as nationally as well. We need to build about 200,000 housing units. And this is not just affordable housing, but housing across the board.
How do we do that? Because that is a huge problem. We have a housing shortage.
We do.
Okay, so can you answer that quickly, then I'll go to Jeff.
There's a number of issues. Zoning reform at the local and state level are very important. I think at the federal level, what we can do is make it easier for folks to buy a home. We can help millennials, we can help younger people invest in their first home. I think that's very important. We also need to make it easier to build and incentivize cities to be able to build more and make sure that we are addressing the housing shortage that we have and make sure that every person in our community has an option of a place to live.
So Kamala Harris, the vice president, a candidate obviously for the Democrats, has talked about a $25,000 tax credit that will be a down payment for first-time home buyers. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's something that they can do, but let's do something different. Let's provide a very good paying job that's not existent right now in our area. Manufacturing has basically left. What we need to do is have those high-paying jobs with benefits that a person can go to work and work one job, not 2 or 3. What they did is they went from $7.50 all the way to $15, and it literally gutted all of the people that were out there, like McDonald's. They were now making on the front lines the same as managers. So there was no profit in the ownership of that. So it literally, they had to fire everybody and bring them on part-time. Now you have people that are working 12, 16 hours trying to fulfill what the one job was doing. So we need to reevaluate what we're doing, bring in the jobs here, give them good paying jobs with benefits, and this is how we're going to start. And they'll be affording housing.
About a minute left. Is there one thing that you agree with Yasemin?
I think that we're running for the same position, and we need to have the right person in there.
Yasemin.
You know, I don't believe so. I think we're very, very different on not only issues, but also.
There's not one thing you can pick out?
You know, I think we both can agree that people are struggling in our community. That is for sure. I think we can agree on that premise, addressing something that Mr. Zinc just said. When we look at the benefits that Phoenix and Arizona have seen from the bipartisan infrastructure bill, from the CHIPS Act, manufacturing jobs in Arizona are significant. When you look at TSMC investments, when you look at Intel, I mean, the companies cannot even find the amount of workers that they need to fulfill these jobs. We do need to raise wages for working people. That's something I'm going to fight for, is to raise the federal minimum wage. I think that people are very much struggling. They do have to work multiple jobs, but that's because wages are not keeping up with cost of living in this country.
And inflation as well. Thank you both for coming in. I appreciate you for appearing together. Jeff Zink, Yasemin Ansari, thank you very much. Congressional District 3, and there you go. Tram.
Continuing our commitment to keeping you informed during Decision 2024, we are inviting every candidate for federal office to speak with us here at 12 News. Today we are featuring Congressional District 6. We did invite Representative Juan Ciscomani, a first-term Republican, for an interview as well. But today we are joined by Zoom by his Democratic opponent, Kirsten Engel. Ms. Engel, thanks so much for joining us here on 12 News at 4 o'clock this Friday afternoon. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Why take on the challenge of going again for running for this district? You took on Juan Ciscomani back in 2022. You lost by just 5,200 votes. Why take on the challenge again this go round?
Well, you're absolutely right. It was an incredibly close race. That's just a little over 1% of the voters. And we were very much outspent during that race, over 6-1. And the voters have seen my opponent these last 2 years, what he's done in Congress, and they're seeing a mismatch between how he's presented himself, what their values are, and how he's been voting in Congress. He is really tacked to the far right on everything from reproductive rights to issues of securing the border. So I am running to protect reproductive rights, to embrace bipartisan solutions to solving the crisis on the border, to working on issues that working families are telling us they want action in Congress on, from lowering prices to creating more affordable housing, to making sure that we have a secure water future. So these are the issues that I'm running on. It's been wonderful to have so much support for this second run for Congress, and we're looking forward to a win in November.
You have a very large district, or that is a very large district. We got Greenlee, Cochise, Pima, Pinal, and Graham counties. Obviously, a very large swath of the state.
5 counties.
Five counties. A very large swath of the state. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different ideologies. What are some of the things you have learned from your last go-around from the 2022 race to now that folks are telling you about that are their major concerns?
Well, so many people that I talk to are a bit, to be honest, fed up with the partisanship of our politics. And they're also upset at seeing so many, extremist members in Congress, including my opponent. They want people who are going to go to Congress, not forget where they are from, and try to work on solutions. And these are solutions that need to work for our, urban areas, our rural areas. But I think we can. I think people really want some separation between issues that they want politicians to leave to them to decide, such as their healthcare decisions. That's something that I believe should be left to them to make their decision about with their doctor and their family, not make it a political decision. And they want their leaders to be going to Washington and trying to, fix problems. And I would say, the border and working on reforming our immigration system are top issues here in Arizona that I am prepared to tackle. And once again, I would point to my Republican opponent, Juan Ciscomani, as rejecting bipartisan solutions on the border and just answering to his party bosses. That is not what people all over the district have been telling me that they want.
First day, if elected, you walk through the halls of Congress. What are you tackling first, if elected?
I am tackling protecting reproductive rights and restoring those rights that women lost when Roe versus Wade was repealed. So that is a top issue. Let's return those issues to women to make with their doctors and their families. Then I'm going to get to work on lowering prices. I was a big advocate of tackling this issue when I served in the Arizona legislature. I served for 5 years, two terms in the Arizona House, one in the Arizona Senate, working on making sure and advocating for the power of our Attorney General to go after price gougers, retailers that were jacking up prices on essential items during an emergency. Can you imagine that? Really unfair to our families. Working on, breaking apart this massive consolidation we've had in retail that is leading to monopolistic practices. Working on making sure we got more affordable housing. And working on our water issues, making sure that we're using the very best technology on our farms to make sure that we are conserving our water so that we have that for our kids into the future.
Yeah. Continue our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024. We're inviting every candidate for federal office here into the 12 News studios. And today we're featuring Congressional District 6, which includes Casa Grande, Eloy, Arizona, as parts of Tucson, all the way down to the border. We sat down with Kirsten Engel, your opponent, your challenger, and you can watch that interview on 12 News YouTube channel. But joining us now is Republican Congressman Juan Ciscomani. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Congressman, thank you for being in here. Let's start with that port strike.
Yeah.
If that thing, experts say, if it lasts 2 weeks or so, it could really hurt the economy. What would you like to see done by the federal government to try to help the situation?
Yeah, anything after a week, it really starts impacting when you have lumber or steel, all these things that we heavily depend on. It can cause a serious supply chain issue and more consequences on that. That can impact the economy and inflation more than where it is right now. Families are already hurting. So this comes at a terrible time for working families all across the U.S.
So what would you like to see done?
So what we need to be doing right here, both sides need to come to the table and negotiate, and the White House can be helpful with that, and working with both sides to come to an agreement. They also have the power to enact the TAFL Act that would force them to go back to work for at least 90 days. But even the union leader has said that if that happens, how much work are they really going to be able or willing to do if that is the case? That can't be the solution. They really need to come to the table and find some kind of agreement that both sides are okay with.
We got to work that out,
yeah,
for sure. All right, other breaking news today on the international scene, since I have you in here. Iran firing missiles into Israel today. How involved should the U.S. be? And now multiple fronts of a war that Israel's fighting.
Multiple fronts. I was in Israel just a few months ago, and in April this year, and we got to go up north. That was before that area became as hot as it is right now, because obviously the south was where the action was happening, Gaza area. So now they're, as you mentioned, they're fighting multiple battles on multiple fronts. So Israel obviously has the right to defend itself, and The aid that the U.S. has provided Israel so far has been what's helping them be able to defend this. The Iron Dome, which break down in my
more
district.
aid? Is it appropriate amount of aid? More aid?
Well,
or
we need
less
to take
aid?
it day by day right now. This happened today, so we need to make sure that we hear from their leaders on what's happening. And I mean, this isn't going to be over anytime soon. And we knew that when this was unleashed on October 7th, almost a year anniversary, and this is still ongoing. So we expect this to go longer, but we need to stand by our ally Israel for sure.
You've got a very interesting district. A lot of it is Pima County, which is heavily Democratic. You won down there. Your seat is being seen as one of the most hotly contested in the country, you said,
Yeah.
correct?
It is. It's a competitive seat. It's about 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, and 1/3 Independent. So I call it one of those good ideas win kind of district, right? You can be on whatever side of the aisle, but if you work with people, if you show results, if you represent the district properly, the voters are going to reward you and give you another term. That's what we saw with members like Jim Colby that was there for a long time, and then Gabby Giffords after him. The district has swapped between Republican and Democrat several times. So we won it last time, flipping it to a Republican seat. And we've been working hard, producing results and focusing on veterans. It's 70,000 veterans in our district. It's a border district as well. But the economy is the number one issue that I keep hearing from families and people.
Well, how can you improve the economy as a member of Congress? We've got about a minute left.
Well, listen, the government spending has been out of control for a long time. My family, I'm a parent of 6 kids. I'm also a flag football coach, drop kids off
You're a
at
busy
school.
guy.
So listen, I get to go everywhere and talk to parents, talk to family members, talk to seniors living on fixed incomes, and they're all hurting from this. But it starts with government spending. It starts with the way the inflation has been going. So we need to be reducing that for sure, and also unleash American energy. And these kind of things like what's happened with the port and everything doesn't help the supply chain, which increases prices and puts more families out of the reach of affording basic necessities. So that is the number one priority for me.
So reduce spending, more energy production here in the United States.
Yeah. Energy independence. We have what it takes here in the U.S. We can protect the environment, which we should do, and also promote economic development. We can do both of them at the same time.
Congressman, thank you for coming in. Good luck in your race.
Thank you so much.
All right. Continuing our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024, we are inviting every candidate for federal office into the 12 News studios. Today we are featuring Congressional District 8, and that covers much of the Northwest Valley, including parts of Peoria, Glendale, Surprise, Anthem, Sun City. So we've invited Republican candidate Abe Hamadeh to come in for an interview. This is an open seat right now, and we hope to get that scheduled soon. But joining us in studio today is a Democratic candidate for CD8, Greg Whitten. Good to see you, Greg.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
You've got an interesting background, biosecurity. Tell us
Correct.
how you think that will play into if you made it into Congress.
Well, honestly, this isn't going to be the last pandemic, right? And every time we get out of a pandemic, we need to invest back in that. And so when I go to Washington, I want to make sure that we're prepared for the next one, so we don't have the issues like we did for COVID-19, where we have global shutdowns. So my background in that will be able to bring that to fruition.
What did you do in that job?
I basically oversaw the Chem Biodefense program, so I oversaw the large biosecurity program to include the Syrian Red Line. I also got things done. For the Ebola outbreak, my program was the first prophylactic to be put towards that pandemic.
And a lot of people worry about people coming across the border with weapons of terror and bioweapons and things like that.
Correct.
So tell me about how you would fix our border. Do you say there is a problem there now?
The thing that I see is that we already had a comprehensive border deal that was done, and the other party decided not to pass that because they want to play politics. I'm done playing politics. I want to solve this solution because Arizonans deserve that. And so what we need to do is we need to go back to that piece of legislation. I need to work across the aisle when I get to Congress and be able to finally deliver comprehensive border security for Arizona.
What are the best pieces of that legislation, in your opinion? I know they were talking about trying to get some more judges, work over the amnesty program.
Yes.
Is the amnesty program fixed?
The amnesty program is not fixed. The best thing about that bill was that at the border they could have amnesty hearings, and it put money into the DOJ. And so honestly, expanding that and being able to have that happen quickly instead of putting them into the country where across the board they can be 6, 12, 18 months, you got it done right away. And that's what we need to do. The Republicans want to defund DOJ. I want to put more money in there. I want to get more judges. I want to make sure that the president can shut down the border, which that bill also had as well. So it had all the pieces that we needed to start fixing this problem.
Are there any issues you think that are, I don't want to say specific, but bigger than others in your district? It's an interesting district, right? You've got Sun City up there, Peoria, some of Glendale, and then all the way up to Anthem. What are some of the things that you would do for your constituents in that district?
Well, Social Security and Medicare. The other party wants to have tax cuts that will defund those programs. I'm in houses every single day with constituents talking about how they have to make a decision between their medication and groceries, and I just don't think that is right. So we need to extend the Biden era capping of insulin and the negotiations on the top 10 drugs, but also at the same time, we need to start looking at how we fix these public programs so the people that need it get it the most, and that's what I want to do when I go to Washington.
Probably about 45 seconds left, which is probably not fair. The economy right now, interest rates. What would you do to help tackle those things?
So in my district, the biggest thing is jobs and good jobs. TSMC is in that district, 80,000 jobs over the next 5 years. It's a big chip manufacturing. The other party did not pay attention to that. I want to create good jobs so that people, when they go home, they can afford gas, they can afford food on their table, and they can support their families. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on, making sure that my constituents get that as well.
Greg, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. Good luck to you coming up here in November.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Continue our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024. We are inviting every candidate for federal office into the 12 News studios. And today we're featuring Congressional District 8, and that covers much of the Northwest Valley, including parts of Peoria, Glendale, Surprise, and Anthem. It's an open seat right now. Incumbent Debbie Lesko is stepping down to run for county office. So 2 weeks ago, we talked to the Democrat in this race, Greg Whitten. That interview is on our YouTube channel if you'd like to watch it. But today we are joined by the Republican candidate, Abe Hamadeh. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Troy.
Tell me about your background. You've lived in that district for quite a while.
That's right. I grew up in that district. It was my family's first American dream home. I'm a product of immigrants. My family moved to Arizona. We didn't have much money. We used to be on food stamps, believe it or not. And that was we lived in Peoria and 67th Avenue and Happy Valley. Back then, it was affordable to buy a house. This is about 20 years ago. I went to school up there. My family had a small business on 35th Avenue in Thunderbird, so it feels good to be representing the West Valley, especially with all this economic development happening up there. It's going to be a good place to go to Washington, D.C. to fight for the American people who have felt like they've been left behind, truly, Troy. Where we're seeing our country right now, it's not in a good spot. And that's why I was a former prosecutor at the county attorney's office. I'm also a former Army Reserve captain and intelligence officer who served 14 months overseas in Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of changes to the district with all these foreign companies coming into the district. So I want to make sure we have be able to protect our national security interests, and that's what concerns me with this wide open border.
Yeah, a lot of the tech is really running up in that area. It's going to be exploding, I think. All right, you brought up housing. You said your parents could afford a house. I mean, a lot of young people today are saying, I don't know how I'm going to ever afford a house. What can the federal government do, and you as a congressman, to keep the housing more affordable?
Well, honestly, we have to open up a lot more federal land, what President Trump has been advocating for. Arizona, the western states have so much federal land that are just being sit on. So
who would get that? Developers?
Well, I think we have to put a bidding process in place. But right now, there's a lack of supply for housing. It's a big deal. But if you look at why are the prices increasing so rapidly? Since the COVID pandemic, you're seeing housing just skyrocket, especially in my district. And there's so many foreign companies coming in, so there's a new population growth, but the demand isn't being met. So right now, government needs to get out of the way. Inflation is through the roof, and the reason why is because the economy is not doing as well as what people think it is. I mean, the stock market may be doing well for people who are investing in that, but for the blue-collar folks, they want to be able to afford the American dream home that they're promised.
So what can you do as a congressman to help that?
Well, I think we have to open up our energy sector. I think that's the biggest deal. What Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did is by, revoking Keystone Pipeline, going back with so many regulatory actions. We have to make sure that we have to be an energy dominant country. I served overseas in Saudi Arabia with the U.S. Army. I see that they produce a lot of oil that we import now. Under President Trump, we were energy independent. We have to go back to that because that's the biggest factor of our economy. And once you have energy, it goes into all sorts of other industries as well. So right now, I think the economy is hurting because of the policies that Joe Biden has put on us, and inflation is through the roof.
So you're saying bring the gas prices down, or the energy prices down, and help everything else. About a minute left here. So I want to talk, if I can, about the border. You've made that a big priority as well. There was a Senate bill that was in, a bipartisan bill. It got voted down. If you saw that bill, what would you do with it?
Well, I think we all can agree that hopefully we can all agree that we need to solve our border problem. It's a national security crisis. But I would have voted no on that bill because I don't think it went far enough. Allowing 5,000 illegals every day to come in is not a solution. We have to go back.
Would you say zero?
I think that's where we have to start at. I mean, as a security person, national security person, I worked on bases. We should know who's coming into our country, and we should vet them, and the ones who want to come here legally should be afforded that opportunity. But instead, we're giving illegals free housing, health care, and money while treating Americans as second-class citizens. That's unacceptable to me.
Abe Hamadeh, thank you very much. Good luck to you going forward. continue our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024. We are inviting candidates into the 12 News studios for live interviews, and today we're looking at the race for Maricopa County Attorney. We've reached out to Democratic challenger Tamika Wooten, and we hope to get that interview scheduled for you soon. But today we are joined by the incumbent Republican County Attorney, Rachel Mitchell. Thank you for being here.
Thanks
for having me. I appreciate it. Let's start with some headlines right off the top of our show today. We had powder sent to candidate Kari Lake, senatorial candidate Republican. We had powder on campaign signs in Ahwatukee. How aggressive is your office going to be in prosecuting things like this?
Well, it's really concerning, and people should know that regardless of the party or partisanship, we're going to prosecute those cases if it's brought to us by law enforcement and hold those people accountable. This is not okay. This is not the American system of, elections or politics.
What kinds of crimes are we talking about here if you put powder on a campaign sign?
Depending on what the powder is, I mean, it could be anywhere from a threat to something that could cause serious physical injury, death, that type of thing. So we would look at the harm caused as well as, where things were placed and the extent of it. So
let's talk about going forward. We have the election, we have results. How aggressive will your office be if we're looking at some violent protests from either side?
We are committed to making sure that this election is handled in a peaceful way. That is the American way. And if people are going to try to disrupt it through violence or threats or anything like that, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office will respond to that and hold people accountable for that. It is not acceptable to us.
All right, let's go to another story if we can quickly. Tyron McAlpin, he is a man who's got cerebral palsy. He is deaf. His rather rough arrest by Phoenix PD was caught on camera. Your office made the decision to not go through or charge him with some crimes that he was charged with. What went behind the decision?
Well, I was, the NAACP reached out to me on Friday and asked me to take a look at it personally. Obviously, there's so many cases that I can't look at them personally, every one of them. But this one I did, and I also talked to some community leaders as well as leaders in our office, and based on that, made the decision that we would be dropping any charges against Mr. McAlpin.
Why?
Well, we looked at the totality of the situation. Obviously, we're going to have the same charging standard for every case,
right,
whether there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction. And that means we're going to take into account all of the context of what happened. And we did that, and based on that, I felt like dropping charges was appropriate.
So getting this case in front of a jury based on how the arrest was made, you thought would be a losing proposition or would be tough?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
And inappropriate as well.
Okay. The very headline on your campaign website says, "I don't want to see Phoenix or Maricopa County turn into the hellscape that is Los Angeles."
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is I see the same videos that everybody else sees on X or social media that show massive groups of people going into stores, wiping them out, people not being held accountable for crimes, DAs or county attorneys as we call them announcing they're not going to prosecute certain types of crime. I'm not that kind of county attorney. I'm the kind of county attorney that I'm a career prosecutor. I'm going to hold people accountable. I'm going to enforce the law. And because I want to make sure people are safe. I was born here, I grew up here, and I don't want Phoenix or Maricopa County to turn into what Los Angeles or Philadelphia or New York have turned into.
30 seconds here, I know it's tough, but let's say you get another term here, 4 more years. What are your goals?
Well, I want to continue working on organized retail crime. I think that is a bedrock issue. That kind of money that is made from that is used to smuggle drugs. Obviously, I want to continue to tackle the fentanyl that's pouring across our border. And I want to make sure that we address violent crime among juveniles. That is a growing trend across the United States, and it has to be curtailed. And it has to be curtailed early so that their lives are not affected and that they can get into society and be productive citizens.
County Attorney, thank you for being here.
Thank
Good luck going forward.
Thank you.
12 News is taking a look at the District 2 congressional race, and District 2 covers a huge part of our state, including the cities of Flagstaff, Florence, Maricopa, Casa Grande, along with much of the Navajo Nation. So we've reached out to the Republican incumbent in this race, Eli Crane. We're working right now to schedule an interview with him. We hope to have that for you soon. Today, joining us is Democratic candidate running in District 2, former Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez. Jonathan, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Troy.
We just talked about how diverse this district is.
Yes.
A lot of Navajo Nation, a lot of cities down there in Pinal County.
Right.
Is it possible to represent all these different people?
Absolutely. There are 22 tribes in Arizona, as you know, Troy, and 14 of those tribes are in this district. It's very rural, 60% of the state, Congressional District 2. And, I think the folks, as you heard on the news, people are struggling out there. And, with evictions, and I think just people are wanting to see a better economy. And I think that's what Congress is tasked to do. And I've been hearing this from folks from Kayenta, Arizona, the Navajo Nation, all the way to Prescott Valley, into Globe, and it is a very large district.
Right. Let's stick with the economy then. So what would you do to try to spur the economy, get things going, get prices under control?
Well, I think we got to hold our businesses accountable. They have had record number growth, and we also need to make sure.
So you tax businesses more, is what you're
saying? Well, what we need to do is just hold businesses more accountable. We need to bring those prices down so that our families can get ahead. And we also have to look at housing. We got to get affordable housing, affordable child care, and getting more infrastructure into the communities. And that brings jobs into the area. And as president of the Navajo Nation, I have a record of, bringing in resources into the nation and also creating jobs. And right now, we haven't seen that from my current opponent. I know that being in there for a year and a half is not too long, but you have to have a network. Over 18 years of public service. I've been the council member of the Navajo Nation, as well as a Navajo County Board of Supervisor.
But have you been involved in some of the larger cities, the Florences, the Maricopas, the Flagstaffs?
Right. I mean, we've been talking with Flagstaff, getting infrastructure into those communities, because tribal communities, federal lands are right around these larger cities. In order for infrastructure to get from one place and into these communities, you need to know how the federal policies are set up so that we can get water infrastructure. One of the things that is a priority, and one of the large discussions that we've been having in the rural parts of Arizona is the need for water in the growth areas. And as you know, I was able to be a part of the New Mexico Water Rights Settlement, and just recently when I was president, the Navajo-Utah Water Rights Settlement Act. And in that act, there's a provision there where we can lease water to our neighbors. And the new, yeah.
And that makes sense in a lot of rural communities, for sure. We don't think about that in the cities quite as often, although we have with what's going on with the Colorado River. All right, we have about 35, 40 seconds left. Right. The border right now. Do you support a border fence? Do you support tougher measures at the border? What do you support?
We need to bring resources to the border, finances. We need to bring dollars in so that our Border Patrol, all the folks that are working there, giving them the needed resources to protect our homelands, and also the resources so that folks that are wanting to have a better life, that are wanting to come in to the United States, can get through quicker and be able to provide a better future for their families.
Pathway to citizenship. Jonathan Nez, thank you so much.
Thank you, Troy.
Candidate for Congressional District 2. Nice talking with you. Good luck going forward.
Thank you, sir.
Continue our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024. We are inviting every candidate for federal office into the 12 News studios. And today our focus turns to Congressional District 9. Interesting district. You can see how it's drawn there. Big chunk of the West Valley, including parts of Glendale, Litchfield Park, Goodyear, but nearly all of western Arizona, far western, including Wickenburg and Kingman. It is a huge district. So we've invited the Republican incumbent, Paul Gosar, for an interview. We hope to have that for you soon. But today, we are joined by the Democratic challenger, Quacy Smith. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Good to be here.
So you've got an interesting background. You were in the Marine Corps. You've also been a pastor, and you're an attorney. Why do you want to go to Washington?
I think this time of year one is very special to the voters because of, obviously, the election. And they need someone that can go there that can help heal the nation, somebody that can work across the aisle and get things done, that's not really interested in furthering things for themselves, but really see the needs of the people. And the problems that we have, they're emanating from Washington. I firmly believe that. There's no crisis at the border. There's a crisis in Washington, D.C.
Well, let me stop you right now. Let's talk about the border since you brought it up.
Sure.
What would you do at the border down there? Are you a pro-wall or anti-wall at this point?
I wouldn't limit it to just wall. Okay. I'm a pro-secure the border. Whatever that takes, secure the border.
What are your ideas? What do you think?
I think we need, obviously, more Border Patrol agents. In a nutshell, we need that bill that should have passed that was blocked earlier. I don't think that border needs to be secured by executive action. I think it needs to be secured by the actions hands of Congress. That's Congress's job to pass legislation. So we need to get out of our corners, come to the table and discuss it. That includes securing the border, making a pathway for citizenship for those that belong here. The ones that don't belong here, you know, that are actually bad actors, they do need to be sent back to wherever they came from. But that requires us initially to secure the border. We need more judges, Border Patrol agents.
The amnesty system right now seems to be broken, doesn't it?
It's very broken.
Okay, so how would you fix that?
You have people that have been in that system for 16, 18 years. I know them personally as an attorney, and that's inexcusable for someone to wait that long to be processed into the United States. But again, it's a lack of attention being paid to it, and I don't think that our current politicians are resolving it because it's political profit for them. It's beneficial to them around the election, but for 4 years, you won't hear anything else about it meaningful, and that's been for years.
Oh, I mean, I've been here 30 years. They've been talking about comprehensive border reform that whole time, and I've never really seen anything. So it's almost like it's a third rail. All right, let's move on to the economy.
Sure.
A lot of people right now are having trouble paying their rent. You know, gas prices, thankfully, are down again, but grocery prices are up. The economy, affordability of living.
Absolutely. That has to be on the forefront of any elected official's mind, and certainly any candidate that's running. Things are high. We feel it every day, regardless of whether you're in the middle class or even upper class folks. Prices are high, and we need to look toward our policies internally to stop price gouging, to stop excessive fees. We have to deal with inflation head on. I think things are getting better, but I think there are things that can be put in place.
What about housing? Can I ask you about housing? Because that seems to be very difficult, especially for our younger people coming up.
Sure, folks can't afford to purchase homes nowadays. Folks that are graduating college, they have jobs making $50,000, $60,000 a year. They can't afford homes, even in our state, in our city, with the growth. And so we have to cap rental costs and keep these companies from buying up big batches of homes and inflating the rent, because it's putting pressure on the mortgage industry as well. And then we'd have to cap the interest rate for folks, young folks that are first-time home buyers. I particularly agree with Vice President's notion. Let's give these folks some incentive and some down payment assistance so folks that are contributors, taxpayers, young families can afford to buy a home, because that is the beginning of generating wealth and establishing.
Creating wealth with your home. Now, you're up against it. A lot of the West Valley, a lot of western part of the state, pretty red. You say you're feeling pretty confident, though. Paul Gosar has been in politics a long time.
Sure. And I think the list of things that people could object to Paul Gosar being sent back to Washington are replete. But what the nation needs now, the West Side and the country in general, is moderates. I'm an unashamed moderate Democrat. I don't have a problem saying that. I'm in the middle of the road guy. I think we move the country forward from the middle out, not from the extremes in. We can't take extreme positions and try to find middle ground. We have to find middle ground. There are things that 90% of Americans agree to, and that's where I am. Let's get it done. That's not a Republican issue, a Democrat, or independent issue. These are American issues. The inflation affects everybody, regardless of your party. The immigration affects everybody, regardless of your party. And so it is red out there, but what we're seeing on the ground is people want something different. They're ready for change, and I think I bring that fresh wave. I've been on both sides of the tracks. I was raised on welfare and food stamps. Now I'm a lawyer, own a law office downtown. I know what it's like to be on both sides, and I think I can provide an experience for the voters out in that area and do something for them. And so I'm the difference. I'm a better choice this election.
Quacy, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Troy.
Good luck to you going forward. 12 News is inviting all candidates for federal office into our studios during 12 News at 4. And today we're looking at the District 4 congressional race. And District 4 covers much of the East Valley, including Mesa, Tempe, Ahwatukee, even parts of Chandler. So we are in contact with Democratic incumbent Congressman Greg Stanton from this district, and we're working on time to get him in studio. But today we're speaking with his Republican opponent, Kelly Cooper. You are a restaurant owner. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And you want to get into politics. You own some popular restaurants. Why? Why do you want to get in?
It's a great question. So I came from a single mom and worked my way up into my mom being single, working 3 jobs, and my sister and I really struggled as children. But I worked very hard to come up and build what I view as my American dream. So we're under construction on a 4th restaurant. I have partners in 3 other restaurants. To go from there, serving in the Marine Corps, and then on to building and operating successful restaurants, I feel like that ability is being withered away. And I want to and feel an obligation to step in and protect the American dream for my children.
All right, so specifically, what kind of thing can you do to get into a body? And I asked this of all congressional candidates, 435 people there. What can you do to change things in terms of the economy and opportunities and things you just talked about?
Yeah, so there's two things. I think the most important thing that we can be talking about is how we clear the stagnation, because not moving forward and not making progress for the American people is one of the biggest struggles that you have in Washington. We have a bright future ahead of us, but we need people that are going to go there and try to break through that. Now, what does that mean? That means that we need to be addressing our standard of living, which has been shrinking in comparison to rising wages, slightly rising wages, and overall wages are down compared to inflation. We need to protect our communities and our border. And neither one of those things are laced with hate. They're about being able to provide the American dream for our next generation.
But so many of those things are partisan issues. Are you going to be willing to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats if you get in there to try to make something happen?
Well, I think you have to. I mean, that's how we opened this up, by saying that there's stagnation in D.C. If I'm not willing to go there and reach across the aisle to any Democrat or independent that's willing to work with me to make positive movement for the people here in Arizona and the rest of the country, then what am I doing? I might as well stay home and continue to operate my restaurants and spend that time with my family. But I feel that obligation, that calling to go there and try to make a difference. And I think that really is about bringing people together. It's about working with empathy and compassion. I think most of the American people right now feel like they're hanging on to the bottom rung of the ladder for fear of falling off of what we would all call the American dream. And somebody like myself that has the military background that's served all over the world, as well as the business background and success in business, can go there and address some of these issues, I think, with pretty direct, hopeful success.
Immigration, big factor.
Absolutely.
Controlled by the federal government, of course. Your thoughts on, are you a pro-Trump wall person, Donald Trump wall?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be at this point. I think there are some things that we have to do to stem or triage the issue that we're seeing right now. So Remain in Mexico is a policy that I think that we should be reinstituting right now. Finishing the wall,
so Remain in Mexico, meaning anybody who wants to come across has to stay there until the immigration process.
Right, and this is where some of that stagnation comes, because asylum claims have to be filed within our country, and most people don't know that. So this is what I mean by being able to clear some of that logjam. You can't add more processing, and you can't add more money, and you can't add more making things nicer until we've done something about the overwhelming amount of people that are coming across the border. That really border control, at this point, border security is at a processing agent level, and the people that are trafficking in children, humans, drugs are right underneath that, that overwhelming wave of people. Nobody wants, I won't say nobody, I don't want to be anti-American. America is about the land of opportunity. And what that means to me is those that want to come here, whether it be needs, asylum, or merit-based, should be coming through our legal ports of entry.
Right. And those laws definitely need to be looked at. And
Absolutely.
They've been looked at for some 30 years. Thank you for coming in. You're in kind of a swing district here. Could go either way. So appreciate you coming in. Good luck going forward here in November. Continue our commitment to keep you informed during Decision 2024. We're inviting every candidate for federal office into the 12 News studios. And today we are featuring Congressional District 7. That's that brown area there. It is a huge land area. It's actually bigger than several U.S. states. It covers Tolleson and Avondale up here in the West Valley, but it also stretches all the way down to Gila Bend, parts of Tucson, and a very long stretch with the border with Mexico. Now, we've invited the incumbent, Democrat Raul Grijalva, to come in the studio for an interview, but today we are joined by his Republican opponent, Daniel Gutierrez. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. You have an interesting personal story. You actually did some time behind bars.
Yeah, I did a total of 9.5 years behind bars. It took 30 years before the state finally admitted that I hadn't committed the crime that they had put me in prison for. And then Judge Jeffrey T. Bergen, which is Superior Court judge in Tucson, came back and took it a step further and said there was never a conviction in the first place. And I had spent years and years telling the courts, and I exhausted all the courts. I said, hey, I do not have a conviction. They denied me and denied me. And when I went to get my rights restored, I went to the clerk in the Superior Courts, and I asked her if she could give me the date of conviction. And she pulled my file, and it took her 2 minutes. just 2 minutes to come out and say, you don't have a conviction. I asked her.
How's that time behind bars shaped you as a candidate, you think? As a man?
It's made me a stronger person. It put me in touch with people that I would have never been in contact with. It's helped me have a better understanding of people that I would have never been around. It's made me a better man for what I want to address right now, which is the fentanyl crisis.
Let's talk about that. Your district, it's hundreds of miles of border. We all saw the map there. And we talk about fentanyl being one of the worst things that's coming across the border. Tell me about how you would try to fight that.
Well, I would want to finish the wall. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, that's a extremist idea. Well, I'm not an extremist. I'm not an extremist on the right. I don't believe in the extremists on the left. It wasn't too long ago, maybe 16, 17 years, that we didn't have issues between Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we all got along, families got along, but we become so divided. But we need to secure that border. We need to finish the wall and open up our ports of entry.
Would you be willing to compromise with Democrats in Congress? Because that's where it seems like we have this stalemate going on right now to get something done that would be bipartisan.
I would absolutely work with them. And I can tell you, Juan Ciscomani's had 2 congressional hearings, and he's invited the Democrats down to look at the wall, and he actually went to Sassamy and looked at the wall. And they ordered, there were 8 sections that had been removed, big 20-foot sections. There were 8 of them. And what happened, and the Border Patrol are picking the migrants up and taking them over to the patrol station where they process them and then take them to immigrant camps. Well, while they're doing that, the drug runners are just running across the border. They go across Mr. Chilton's ranch. He's a rancher over in Sassby in Arivaca. And he's got camcorders set up. So at those congressional hearings, he showed up with all the videos and showed it. So all the congressional leaders went down and saw what was going on at the border and had those areas closed up.
And that's something that you would work on. All right, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming
All right.
in, and good luck to you in your race coming up.